She threw your baby? The paramedic's voice cracked as he lifted my son from the asphalt. The heat rippled off the pavement, shimmering like liquid fire, and standing right behind him was Brenda Mallory, president of our HOA board, her sunglasses reflecting the chaos she'd caused. I was enforcing community rules, she said, arms folded, voice clipped like she'd just written a parking ticket instead of tossing a newborn into 105-degree sun. The badge clipped to my belt caught the light, but she didn't notice, or didn't care. I turned to her slowly, the kind of turn that makes everyone else step back. "You just committed a crime, Brenda," I said, "and you did it on camera." She blinked, half laughing, the arrogance not yet cracking. She thought she still had control. She didn't know I'd already triggered my body cam when I saw the ambulance lights. If you're a parent or someone who's ever had to defend your family from power-drunk people, you'll want to follow this story, because what Brenda did today doesn't end with an apology, it ends with handcuffs. Subscribe now, because the next few hours decide whether this neighborhood learns what accountability really means. My name's Daniel Reeves. I've spent 17 years in law enforcement, 10 of them handling child endangerment and abuse cases. I know what evidence looks like, how patterns build, how predators justify themselves with words like rules and policy. I moved to Copper Sands Estates to give my wife a quiet life after her difficult pregnancy. Instead, I walked into a HOA kingdom where power isn't about service, it's about control. Brenda's been the self-declared monarch of this place for 6 years, and until now, no one stood up to her. My son's playpen sat under the shaded porch, covered, with a fan misting light water, our pediatrician's exact recommendation for airflow in dry heat. Brenda had complained about it once already, called it visible clutter. I ignored her. Today, while my wife stepped inside to answer the delivery door, Brenda saw the baby, marched across our private boundary, and decided to correct the violation. When she ripped open the canopy, my son started crying, and instead of stepping back, she grabbed him, lifted him like he was a bag of trash, and walked toward the street yelling about rules. By the time I arrived, the baby's skin was blotched red, his cries dry and strained. The melted corner of that canopy glared up at me as the paramedics worked. I could smell the plastic, the sunscreen, the burnt air. Every parent knows that smell, the one that makes your hands tremble because it shouldn't be there. And all I could think was, I've seen people lose their kids over less, but I wasn't just a father standing on a driveway. I was an officer. I knew what to do. I took 3 photos, temperature reading, time, injury pattern, and sealed my anger behind procedure. I wasn't going to give her the satisfaction of seeing me snap. Not yet. Brenda started talking again, her voice loud enough for the neighbors peeking through blinds. "You people think the rules don't apply to you just because you wear a uniform." That's when I finally looked at her, straight through those mirrored lenses, and said, "You just broke the only law that matters today. You put a child in danger." The crowd's murmurs shifted. Doubt spread through her confidence like cracks in glass. She opened her mouth again, but the siren drowned her out. In this community, people fear confrontation more than injustice. They pay the fines, nod politely, and pretend the system's fair. That ends today. Because Brenda may have thought she was dealing with another passive homeowner, but she just crossed someone who spent his career dismantling exactly this kind of arrogance, with evidence, not emotion. When the ambulance pulled away, I stood alone by that melted canopy. The air was still burning, but inside, something had gone cold and surgical. I didn't need vengeance. I needed a record. And Brenda had given me one. The HOA rules she worshipped were about to become the evidence that buried her authority. I looked at the sky, that endless white blaze over Copper Sands Estates, and whispered to no one, "You picked the wrong porch today." Then I turned toward the house, already drafting the report in my head. Every second counted now, because this time, the HOA queen was the one under investigation. By the time I stepped inside, the house felt too quiet. The air conditioning hummed like a heartbeat, steady, but tense. Lena sat on the couch, holding a glass of water she hadn't touched. "He's okay," she said softly, her voice raw. "They said mild exposure, nothing lasting." She tried to smile, but it broke halfway. I nodded, but I didn't sit down. The melted canopy lay outside the window, its corner drooping like an accusation. I couldn't look at it without hearing my son's cry again. The neighborhood email alert pinged on my phone, a community notice. I opened it and stared at Brenda's name in bold. She'd already sent a blast to every resident. Incident at 427 Palm Drive. Unsafe parental behavior observed. HOA taking disciplinary measures. She hadn't even waited for the ambulance to clear the block. My wife leaned closer, reading over my shoulder, her face twisted in disbelief. She's framing it like we endangered him. I clenched my jaw, the edges of my badge pressing cold into my hip. I wanted to storm down the street and end it right there, but I'd seen how rage can ruin good men. Instead, I picked up my phone and started logging every detail: time, temperature, her statement, the paramedics' response, evidence, not emotion. The only language people like Brenda fear. A knock startled us. I opened the door to find our next-door neighbor, Marla, clutching her phone like a weapon. "Daniel, you need to see this," she whispered. On her screen was the same HOA email, but she'd scrolled down to the comment thread. Dozens of residents arguing. Some defended Brenda, others accused her of crossing a line. Marla's eyes darted around before she lowered her voice. "She's done this before. To the Donnellys last summer. Their kid's sandbox violated sightline ordinances. They paid the fine just to stop her visits." That's when it hit me. This wasn't about our baby. It never was. This was a pattern, an entire neighborhood under silent threat. Families afraid to speak up because Brenda turned rules into weapons. I thanked Marla and asked her to forward everything. She hesitated, glancing at the street. "Be careful," she said. "She has people who do her dirty work, maintenance, compliance, even cameras on the lampposts." After she left, I sat at the dining table and opened my laptop. Copper Sands HOA had a public portal, annual reports, minutes, enforcement policies. As I scrolled, the same pattern appeared over and over. Brenda's initials beside nearly every fine. No co-signatures, no board confirmation. She'd been operating alone, masquerading as a full committee. That was my first breadcrumb. Lena watched me work, her hand resting over her stomach, where she used to cradle our son before the hospital took him for observation. "Daniel," she whispered, "you're going to make this right, aren't you?" I looked up from the screen. "I'll make sure she never touches another family again." The house phone rang, an old landline we barely used. The caller ID read Copper Sands office. I picked up. Brenda's voice came through, sweet but edged. "Chief Reeves, I suggest you refrain from making any false statements about today's incident. The HOA will be reviewing your conduct." I let her finish, then said quietly, "Everything you did was recorded, Brenda. I'd advise you not to contact my family again." Silence, then the click of the line disconnecting. That call changed everything. Now it wasn't just about my son's safety, it was about intimidation. She wanted to make sure I stayed silent. Instead, she gave me the final piece I needed to involve external authorities. I noted the call time, saved the voicemail log, and sent myself a copy. As the night deepened, I could see porch lights flickering across the block, one by one, neighbors moving, whispering, watching. The illusion of safety was cracking. Brenda's hold on this community was built on fear, but fear only works when no one pushes back. I closed my laptop and stood by the window. The desert wind was still hot, carrying the smell of dust and burnt plastic. Somewhere out there, she probably sat smug in her living room, believing she'd neutralized another homeowner. But she didn't know me. I don't fight in secret. I fight by procedure. Tomorrow, I'd start documenting her entire chain of violations, cross-referencing every fine, every threat, every misuse of authority. The HOA rules she used as her shield would become the evidence that took her down. And when the county saw the pattern, Copper Sands wouldn't just lose its queen. It would lose its crown. The next morning, I drove to the maintenance shed behind the clubhouse, a squat metal building that baked in the sun like an oven. The air smelled of motor oil and dust, and inside, I found Eddie Torres hunched over a workbench. His hands were trembling slightly as he sorted through a tangle of wires that didn't need sorting. When he saw me, his posture straightened, but his eyes darted toward the door like he was afraid someone had followed me. "Chief Reeves," he said quietly, voice low enough that even the humming fan couldn't catch it. "I figured you'd come by." He looked younger than I remembered, mid-30s maybe, but the sweat clinging to his neck made him seem older, worn down by rules he didn't make. His fingers fidgeted with a wrench that slipped from his grip, clattering loud against the concrete. He winced, glanced toward the small camera above the door, then shook his head. "It's been recording since yesterday," he muttered. "Brenda checks the feed every night. I shouldn't even be talking to you in here." "Then we'll step outside," I said. But he shook his head again quickly. "No, she'll see us together." His voice cracked on the last word. I waited, letting the silence fill the room until he finally spoke again. "I saw what she did to your kid. He stopped, rubbed his palms on his jeans, and tried again. "I filmed it. I didn't mean to at first, but when she started shouting, I hit record on my phone. I thought it'd calm her down if she knew I had proof. It didn't." He pulled the phone from his pocket but hesitated, thumb hovering over the screen. Every part of him screamed conflict, the tapping foot, the tight jaw, the shallow breathing. "She said if anyone releases footage that makes the HOA look bad, it's grounds for termination and lawsuit." He looked at the camera again. "She's ruined people here before. You don't know how far she goes." "I know exactly how far," I said, keeping my tone calm, professional. "And that's why I need that video handled properly, not leaked, not posted, processed as evidence through the right channels." He looked up at me, confusion flickering between fear and relief. "You mean official?" I nodded. "Chain of custody, clean, legal, and protected. That's the only way this ends without her burying you along with herself." For a long moment, he didn't move. The fan buzzed, the fluorescent light flickered, and sweat rolled down his temple. Finally, he swiped the screen and turned the phone toward me. The video started. Brenda yelling, the baby's cry piercing through, the sun glaring white-hot. Eddie's breath hitched watching it, like he was reliving it. "I didn't know she'd go that far," he whispered. "I thought she'd stop at yelling. She said she just wanted to prove a point about porch safety." His hand trembled as he paused the clip. "She proved something," I said. "Just not what she thinks." I asked if he could send it to me securely, but he hesitated again, thumb frozen above the share icon. "She checks my phone sometimes, makes sure I'm not misusing company property. She says the HOA owns all maintenance devices." I smiled grimly. "Then back up the file to your personal cloud, under a private folder name. I'll have an external investigator pull it through subpoena if needed. You'll stay anonymous until it's time." He looked down, thinking, his shoulders slowly easing, as if the weight had shifted just slightly off him. "If this goes bad," he said, "I'll lose my job." "If it doesn't," I answered, "someone else will lose their child." He met my eyes then, really met them, and something broke through the fear. He nodded once and hit send. The file appeared on my encrypted inbox seconds later. As I left the shed, I saw Brenda across the courtyard, clipboard in hand, inspecting someone's recycling bins like she was auditing the Pentagon. Eddie noticed her too, and instinctively stepped back into the shadows. His hands went to his cap, twisting the brim over and over. Guilt lived in every small movement. But so did courage, fragile, shaking, but real. When I got into my car, I glanced at the video thumbnail glowing on my phone. That single file was now the first clean piece of evidence connecting Brenda's authority to a criminal act. The outside agencies I'd need, the county investigators, child protection, the HOA oversight board, they didn't know it yet, but their case had just begun. As I drove away, I caught sight of Eddie in the rearview mirror, standing at the shed door, his hands shoved deep into his pockets, head down, pretending to fix a latch that wasn't broken. He looked terrified. But sometimes, courage doesn't look like a hero with a badge. Sometimes it looks like a man who finally decides he's done helping the wrong side. I spent the afternoon in my patrol SUV, parked just outside Copper Sands' main gate. From there, I could see the street lined with manicured rocks and solar lamps. Everything in perfect symmetry, except for the rot at its core. My inbox pinged again. Brenda had struck back faster than I expected. A new HOA bulletin went out. Subject line, Public Safety Notice, Unauthorized Law Enforcement Activity. Beneath it was a thinly veiled attack, accusing me of harassment and misusing government authority for personal matters. She'd copied the entire community, the HOA attorney, and even the regional housing liaison. I scrolled through it twice, letting the bile rise, then fade. Brenda's weapon wasn't strength. It was noise. Her strategy was, always to get louder before anyone could get honest. I took a deep breath, opened my notes app, and added her email to the evidence log. Every message she sent made her own noose tighter. The sound of gravel crunching broke my focus. It was Marla, the neighbor who'd warned me earlier, walking her dog along the curb. She leaned in through the open window, whispering, "You saw the new message?" I nodded. "Half the block's talking about it already," she said. "She's telling people you threatened to arrest her." I gave a slow exhale. She's trying to frame the narrative before the county does. Marla shook her head, her eyes darting toward the clubhouse. "She had flyers printed, Daniel. Actual paper flyers. She's posting them tonight." That hit differently. A smear campaign meant Brenda felt the heat. She was preparing for war, not discipline. I thanked Marla and told her to forward anything she found. She hesitated before walking away, the leash trembling in her hand. "Just be careful," she said. "She's dangerous when cornered." I waited until dusk before driving to the HOA office. It sat across from the tennis courts, a bland one-story building painted desert beige, the kind of place that looked harmless until you read what was inside. Through the tinted windows, I could see Brenda pacing, phone pressed to her ear. Her free hand sliced the air as she talked, movements sharp and controlled. I knew that posture well. It was someone who believed they were untouchable. I parked across the street, opened my body cam app, and hit record again. If she approached me, it would be on record this time. I didn't have to wait long. The glass door flew open and Brenda marched out, heels clacking against the concrete. "Chief Reeves," she said, her tone dripping with mock civility, "I suggest you remove yourself from this community immediately. You're under HOA investigation for misconduct." "Good evening to you too, Brenda," I said. "But you don't have jurisdiction to investigate a law enforcement officer." Her mouth tightened, but she smiled anyway. That same brittle smile she wore when she thought she'd won. "Oh, I think the county will be interested in hearing about your temper," she said, "especially when I tell them how you endangered your own child." That one stung. She wanted it to. I stepped closer, enough to make her lower her voice. "Brenda, I know about the unauthorized citations you've been issuing. I know you've been signing HOA enforcement orders without board approval." For the first time, her confidence flickered. Just a second. But I saw it. "You don't know anything?" she snapped. "And you better delete whatever illegal recording you have." "Illegal?" I said, lifting my phone just slightly so the small blinking light reflected in her sunglasses. "This is a lawful recording, Brenda. You're standing in a public access area, making threats. That's not enforcement. It's harassment." Her jaw locked. She didn't move, didn't blink. The silence stretched long enough that the buzz of a street lamp filled the space between us. Finally, she said, "You're making a mistake. You think you can play cop and victim at the same time? I've dealt with louder men than you." I smiled, slow and steady. "Then you should know what happens when the evidence talks louder." I turned and walked back to my SUV without looking back. As I drove away, I saw her through the rearview mirror, standing in the parking lot, phone still pressed to her ear. She was already calling someone, probably her attorney or one of the board members she still controlled. I didn't need to stop her. Every message she sent now became another nail in her case file. When I reached the highway, I forwarded her latest bulletin to my contact at the county's legal department with a short note. "Escalation continuing. Potential interference with ongoing police matter." Then I powered off the phone and sat in silence for a long minute. Brenda thought this was a neighborhood feud. She had no idea she'd just crossed the line into a criminal investigation. By morning, her own words would be in the state's inbox, logged and time-stamped. She'd weaponized the HOA rules, but now the law was about to weaponize her arrogance. I didn't sleep that night. The heat didn't help, but it wasn't the temperature keeping me awake. It was the footage. I'd watched it 5 times already, pausing on every frame where Brenda's hand reached toward the stroller, the sun glinting off her rings. That single movement said everything: arrogance, control, and no hesitation. I needed more than anger, though. I needed structure. So, at 2 a.m., I sat at the kitchen counter, laptop open, and started cross-referencing every HOA action she'd taken in the past year. Copper Sands' digital records were sloppy but public. Brenda had left a trail even a rookie could follow. Fine logs with no co-signers, invoices with missing signatures, citations referencing non-existent bylaws. Every document carried the same initials, BM, and no counter-approval from a treasurer or secretary. For someone obsessed with community standards, she'd violated every one of them. By dawn, I had a 12-page timeline mapping her misuse of authority. The pattern was unmistakable. Every family she'd targeted, single parents, young couples, renters, were people least likely to push back. She knew how to pick her victims, but this time, she'd picked wrong. Lena came into the kitchen, hair messy, eyes red. "You've been up all night." I nodded without looking up. "It's worth it. She's been acting as a one-woman government." I turned the laptop toward her, showing the pattern. "See this column? Board approval signatures. She's the only one signing. No votes, no minutes, no quorum." Lena leaned closer, squinting. "So, she's been breaking her own rules?" "Worse," I said. "She's been impersonating a governing body. That's fraud under state HOA statute." The morning sun spilled across the kitchen tile, highlighting the melted canopy I'd set by the door, a constant reminder of why this mattered. I stared at it for a long time. My son's cry still echoed in the corners of this house. That was the moment I knew I wasn't just documenting this for court. I was documenting it for him. Someday he'd grow up and know that his father didn't let power hide behind paperwork. Around 8, I printed the report, sealed it in a folder, and drove to the county civic center. It was the same building where most HOA charters were filed, a bland structure of gray stone and empty promises. The clerk at the desk looked half asleep until I showed my badge and the folder. "I need to confirm the registration and current standing of the Copper Sands Estates Homeowners Association," I said. She tapped on her keyboard, scanning the state database. A minute later, her expression changed. "That's odd," she said. "Their board hasn't filed a renewal for their compliance certification in over a year. Technically, they're operating on expired status." My pulse slowed, deliberate. Meaning, she said carefully. "They can't legally enforce or issue fines until the certification's renewed. Any disciplinary actions they have taken could be voided." I thanked her and walked back to the SUV, the report folder heavy in my hand. This was it. The first undeniable crack in Brenda's authority. She wasn't just reckless, she was operating without standing. The HOA wasn't a governing body right now. It was just a woman pretending to be one. I sat there for a while, engine idling, letting the implications settle. Every fine, every intimidation, every so-called safety enforcement she'd executed, all of it was illegal. That was the entry point I needed to bring in the state. When I got home, Eddie was waiting near my porch, nervously shifting from foot to foot. He looked like he'd barely slept either. "Chief," he said, voice low, "she knows someone talked. She called a staff meeting this morning and said there's a mole. She's checking everyone's phones." "Then she's panicking," I said. "Good. That means she's scared of what's coming." He rubbed his hands together, eyes darting between the sidewalk and the canopy beside my door. "She told me to fix your porch light next. Said she wants me to inspect it for hazards." His voice cracked on the word inspect. I stepped closer. "Eddie, if she sends you again, call me first. Don't touch a thing. You're protected now. Understand?" He nodded, but his shoulders didn't relax. I could see the fear gripping him like a physical weight. As he walked away, I returned inside and pulled out my notebook. Under the list of evidence, I added a new line: HOA operating without valid certification. State intervention required. The victory strategy had officially shifted from neighborhood politics to county law. The next move wasn't mine alone anymore. The moment the file reached the compliance division, Copper Sands would no longer belong to Brenda Mallory. It would belong to the state. The call from the hospital came just after noon. The nurse's voice was calm, but clipped, the kind of tone that carried news you weren't ready for. "Chief Reeves, your son's temperature stabilized overnight, but the pediatrician wants a follow-up exam. There's mild irritation consistent with brief heat exposure." I thanked her, hung up, and sat still for a long moment. Mild irritation. It could have been so much worse. The image of Brenda's hand yanking open that canopy flashed behind my eyes like a camera bulb that wouldn't fade. I drove straight to Maricopa Children's. The corridors smelled like antiseptic and lemon cleaner, the air cold enough to sting after a week of desert heat. Lena was already there, rocking our son in the soft blue blanket they'd given us in the maternity ward. His skin had healed, pink and healthy. She looked up when I entered. "He's okay," she whispered. "But the doctor said next time even a few more minutes could have caused damage." Her voice broke on the last word. I sat beside her, the vinyl chair squeaking under my weight. "There won't be a next time." I meant it. I'd handled hundreds of child endangerment reports in my career, but none had ever felt like this. Because now, I wasn't just the investigator. I was the victim's father. I needed a clean clinical way to make Brenda's recklessness undeniable. When the doctor came in, I asked for a copy of the medical summary and temperature chart. He raised an eyebrow. "For your records?" "For evidence," I said. He hesitated, then nodded. "I'll have the attending sign it." The papers he handed me 10 minutes later were simple: injury, treatment, cause, environmental heat exposure. It was everything I needed in one line. As we left the hospital, I saw Eddie's name flash on my phone. I stepped aside to answer. His whisper was urgent, wind cutting through the receiver. "She's holding an emergency board session tonight. Says it's to vote you out of the community." I smiled grimly. "She can't vote me out of something that's legally inactive." Silence on the line. "You found something, didn't you?" he asked. "Enough," I said, "but I need to deliver it right." That afternoon, I drove to the county's satellite office downtown, the one used for cross-department coordination. Detective Lena Perez met me in the lobby. We'd worked a trafficking case years ago. She was the kind of officer who measured twice before acting once. "You said you wanted an external chain of custody," she said, holding up an evidence bag. "Show me what you've got." In the conference room, I laid everything out. Eddie's video, Brenda's emails, the HOA's expired certification printouts, and now the hospital record. Lena studied each piece like she was assembling a puzzle. "She operated without legal standing for over a year," she said finally. "That nullifies her enforcement authority. Combine that with the footage and medical report. Yeah, this meets the threshold." "Threshold for what?" I asked. "For a state-level intervention." The words settled heavy. Outside authority. That was the strategy all along. Get the county and state involved, remove my bias, let the law do the speaking. I signed the intake form and handed her the evidence drive. Lena sealed it with a strip of blue tape, initialed it, and locked it in her case folder. "Chain's clean," she said. "I'll notify the compliance division and CPS investigator tonight. You'll get a call once it's logged." When I walked out of that office, the weight I'd been carrying shifted. It didn't disappear. It just became official. Now it wasn't my personal war. It was a state investigation. The sun was setting when I got home. The air shimmered gold across the rooftops, and for the first time, the street felt quiet. Not peaceful, but waiting. I carried my son inside, laid him gently in his crib, and stood there listening to his slow breaths. Lena came to the doorway. "Is it over?" she asked. "No," I said. "But it's no longer just us." I stepped out onto the porch. The melted canopy was still there, brittle and curled, half buried under wind-blown sand. I didn't move it. Evidence doesn't always belong in files. Sometimes it needs to stay where it was born. Tomorrow, Brenda would wake up thinking she still ruled Copper Sands. By afternoon, she'd learned that the state now ruled her. The paperwork was filed, the evidence secured, and the clock had started ticking. From this moment on, every order she gave, every email she sent, every word she spoke in that title of HOA president would count as interference in an active investigation. She'd made herself untouchable for years. Now, she was about to learn what accountability really felt like. The next morning, the desert air carried that strange metallic stillness before a storm, the kind that makes every sound sharper, every instinct louder. I was halfway through a report when I heard a hesitant knock at the door. When I opened it, Eddie stood there, sweat already streaking down his temple, though it wasn't even 9 yet. His eyes were red, like he hadn't slept. He held his cap in both hands, turning it so hard the brim bent. "Chief," he said quietly, "I need to talk. Inside, if that's okay." I led him into the kitchen. He sat but didn't touch the water I poured. His leg bounced under the table, the rhythmic tapping betraying everything he was trying to hide. "She's losing it," he said finally. "Brenda. She's been calling emergency board meetings, threatening anyone who doesn't side with her. Yesterday she told the treasurer she'd rewrite the vote records if people didn't align, said no one would ever know." I let him speak without interrupting. The more he talked, the more it spilled out, fast and raw, like he'd been holding it in for months. She makes us log every house that violates visual uniformity, grass height, door paint, anything she can find. But what she doesn't tell residents is she deletes appeals before they reach the system, says she's saving time. He rubbed his palms together. That's not all. She's been pocketing maintenance funds. Claims go missing, then reappear on invoices she signs herself. I felt the air tighten. You're sure? He nodded. She uses a private PayFast account linked to her name. I only found out because she had me install a new printer in her office last month, and the connection log listed every transaction file. He hesitated, voice dropping lower. And Chief, she's been tracking people. There's a neighborhood app, right, for package theft alerts? She had cameras installed at every lamppost, said it was for security. But they all feed to her personal network. My pen froze mid-note. Not the HOA's servers? He shook his head. Her own router, private IP. I saw it myself. She's watching people, collecting footage, keeping records on everyone, including you. For a second, the kitchen went dead quiet except for the hum of the refrigerator. The idea of her monitoring residents through hidden feeds wasn't just invasive, it was criminal. Why tell me now? I asked. Eddie's gaze fell to his hands. His voice cracked when he answered. Because she made me install those cameras. And yesterday she told me to purge one, your house. She said it's evidence of you harboring violations. I couldn't do it. I told her the lens was cracked, but it wasn't. I just turned it off. His breathing quickened, shoulders shaking as the guilt finally caught up. I didn't mean to help her. I just needed the job. My kid's tuition depends on this, and she knew it. Every time I tried to quit, she'd remind me about the non-disclosure form I signed, said she'd sue if I ever talked. He looked up at me then, eyes glossy, voice breaking. I saw her throw your baby, Chief. I saw her laugh after. I should have stopped her. I leaned forward, steady. You're stopping her now. He covered his face, elbows on the table, shoulders trembling. You don't get it. She's planning something bigger. Said she'll clean up the community before outsiders ruin it. She's got files on every homeowner, screenshots of their private security feeds, even bank statements she shouldn't have. Where are they? In her office, he said, voice a whisper. But not in plain sight. There's a cloud folder she calls CS, Integrity Archives. That's where she keeps the recordings and payment logs. You'll find everything there. I took a slow breath. Eddie, this is enough to trigger a full privacy violation inquiry, but you'll have to sign a statement. He swallowed hard, nodded. I'll do it. Just protect my family. If she finds out, she won't, I said. By tonight, she won't have the authority to touch anyone. He stood, cap twisting in his hands again, but his shoulders seemed lighter now, the tremor fading into something steadier. When he left, I watched from the window as he crossed the street, head down, movements quick. But there was resolve in his stride. I turned back to the table, rereading my notes. Illegal surveillance, misappropriation, document falsification, all connected to a single person. The evidence wasn't just moral now, it was statutory. Brenda Mallory wasn't a bully anymore. She was a criminal suspect. I reached for my phone and texted Detective Lena one line. We have a confession and probable cause for search authorization. Then I looked out at Copper Sands, perfect lawns gleaming under the morning sun, and thought, today, the mask comes off. By noon, the sun was a white fire above Copper Sands, flattening the streets into silence. I parked a block away from the clubhouse where Brenda kept her office and stayed inside the SUV, AC humming low. Detective Lena's message buzzed through. Search authorization approved. Proceed under oversight code 14C. I'll join within the hour. The moment had finally arrived. Everything Eddie confessed, surveillance feeds, falsified fines, private accounts, was now the backbone of a state-level investigation. The outside authority was no longer theory. It was moving. I scanned the community from my window. A maintenance cart crawled down the path. Sprinklers whirred, and somewhere a dog barked like it could sense the shift. Brenda's blue sedan was parked in front of the clubhouse. I knew her routine. Every morning she reviewed violations with a coffee in one hand and her phone in the other. By now, she'd be inside, reviewing the same feeds that were about to expose her. I stepped out, folder in hand, camera clipped to my chest. The air burned my lungs with every breath. 2 residents watched from their driveways, whispering. They'd seen the flyers, the emails, the chaos. They just didn't know yet that the state was about to turn her own evidence against her. Inside, the clubhouse was dim and cool, blinds half drawn. Brenda looked up from behind the desk, expression sharpening when she saw me. "You again," she said, voice dry as dust. "Didn't you get my notice? You're under review." I didn't respond. I walked forward and placed the sealed warrant folder on the desk. "State Compliance and Investigative Oversight Division," I said. "Effective immediately, this office is subject to review. You're required to provide full access to all electronic systems and financial records." She blinked, slow, her smirk faltering. "You can't just—" I raised a hand, calm but firm. "This isn't me, Brenda. It's the state. You lost your legal standing when your certification expired last year. That makes every order, every fine, and every surveillance feed illegal." Her chair scraped the floor as she stood. "You're bluffing." Before I could answer, the clubhouse door opened behind me. Detective Lena stepped in, badge visible. "He's not." She handed Brenda an official document packet stamped with the county seal. "You're required to surrender administrative credentials immediately. Any attempt to delete, alter, or remove data will be considered obstruction." For a second, Brenda didn't move. Then her eyes darted toward the side hallway, the direction of her office. She bolted. I followed. The hallway was short, lined with framed pictures of HOA award plaques. Her office door was half open, a faint hum coming from inside. When I stepped in, the monitors were already lighting up. Dozens of live feeds flickered, front yards, driveways, porches, even children playing by the fountains. The entire neighborhood, under her private watch. Brenda's hand hovered over her keyboard, shaking. "You don't understand," she snapped. "They break rules. They cheat the system. Someone has to keep order." "Order?" I said quietly. "You turned a community into evidence without consent." She hit a key and a window popped open, a folder titled CS Integrity Archives. I recognized the name from Eddie's confession. Lena stepped beside me and photographed the screen. "You're done," she said flatly. Brenda backed against the wall, hands trembling. "You don't know what these people are like. They lie. Lena cut her off. "So you spied on them, laundered their payments, threatened their kids? You don't get to call that leadership." I reached over and powered down the system. The screens went dark, the air suddenly heavy. For the first time, Brenda looked small, cornered not by force, but by truth. As Lena read her rights, I collected the USB drives and printed ledgers from the desk, sealing them into the evidence bag. Everything she'd built, every layer of fake authority, was now paper and data. Outside, residents had begun to gather near the clubhouse, drawn by the sound of raised voices and the flashing lights of Lena's unmarked cruiser. I saw Marla among them, hand over her mouth, whispering to another neighbor. The story was spreading before we even spoke. When Brenda was led outside, people stepped back instinctively. No one shouted, no one clapped. The silence was louder than any verdict. As they put her in the car, I turned to the crowd. "It's over," I said simply. "You're safe now." Lena drove off with the cruiser's lights cutting through the desert haze. I stood under that brutal sun, the smell of heat and dust wrapping around me, and thought of my son sleeping peacefully at home. The outside authority had arrived exactly as planned. The law had finally stepped into Copper Sands, and it wasn't leaving empty-handed. That night, Copper Sands felt like a neighborhood holding its breath. The clubhouse lights were still off from the search, the usual HOA patrol carts missing from their rounds. I drove past slowly, headlights dimmed, then parked near the lake where the reflection of the houses rippled under the wind. The stillness was deceptive. Beneath it, the system Brenda built was collapsing in real time. My phone buzzed with a secure message from Detective Lena. "All digital evidence confirmed. State compliance team arrives tomorrow, 8 a.m., requesting your presence for formal debrief." The process was moving faster than I'd expected. Brenda's network, her payments, her private feeds, they were now in the hands of analysts who knew exactly what to do with them. Still, there was work left for me. The community needed to understand what had happened, and more importantly, why it couldn't happen again. I looked out over the water. Across the street, a row of porch lights flicked on one by one, cautious but curious. People had started to talk again, neighbors checking in, parents walking with their kids. Fear was receding, replaced by something quieter. Anticipation. The kind that comes when people realize they've been living under someone else's shadow for too long. I opened my laptop on the hood of my SUV, the desert wind rattling the papers beside me. Using the county's secure upload portal, I compiled every supporting document Eddie had helped uncover. Transaction screenshots, maintenance logs, time-stamped camera files. Each one linked to Brenda's personal account. Every piece would become part of the public record once the case closed. For now, it stayed sealed in state custody. Halfway through uploading, I saw headlights in my mirror. A small pickup rolled to a stop behind me. Eddie stepped out, his posture more solid than before. "Couldn't sleep," he said quietly. "Figured I'd check in." He looked around the lake, then at the open laptop. "She's really gone, huh?" "Detained," I said. "But yes, her power's gone." He nodded slowly, stuffing his hands in his jacket pockets. "People keep texting me. They're asking who's in charge now. I don't even know what to tell them." "Tell them no one's in charge," I said. "Not for a while. Let the state audit finish. Then they'll hold elections. You'll get a fair board, not a dictator." He gave a short laugh. "Never thought I'd see this place without her voice blasting through the speakers." He paused, face turning serious again. "I owe you more than I can say. I thought I'd lose everything, job, house, maybe even get sued, but you made sure she couldn't touch me." I shook my head. "You did that yourself. You spoke up. Without that, none of this happens." He looked down at the ground, kicking at the gravel. "You know, she used to tell me stories about how some rules are bigger than laws. I believed her for a while, thought maybe she really cared about this place. But now, I see it. It was never about order. It was about control." The words hit harder than he probably intended. I stared across the lake again, thinking of the melted canopy back home, the plastic twisted like a scar. Control, that's what it had always been. Brenda just happened to weaponize it. Eddie cleared his throat. "The others will want to help rebuild, you know. Marla, the Donnellys, the retirees. They're angry, but they're ready." "Good," I said, "because they'll need to. Tomorrow, when the compliance team arrives, I'll introduce them to the residents. They'll explain how the audit works and what comes next. After that, this community belongs to its people again." He smiled faintly, the tension in his shoulders finally loosening. "Maybe we'll plant something by the entrance, something new." She cut down every tree she thought was non-compliant. "Maybe it's time we replaced one." "Start with shade trees," I said. "Something that lasts." He nodded, then looked out at the glowing water. "You staying on as a resident?" I hesitated before answering. "Yeah. My son deserves to grow up knowing this street isn't dangerous anymore." Eddie extended his hand, rough and calloused. I took it, firm. "Then I guess we're neighbors again," he said. When he drove away, I finished the last upload and shut the laptop. The ripples on the lake had stilled. The air felt different, not cooler, but cleaner, like the whole place had exhaled. Tomorrow would be the audit, the official closure, the rebirth of Copper Sands. The outside authority had done its part. Now it was the community's turn to learn how to stand without fear. And as I started the engine, I realized that justice wasn't the end of this story. It was the beginning of one finally worth living. The next morning, the air over Copper Sands felt heavy, charged with something more than heat. By 8 o'clock, white SUVs with county decals rolled through the gate, followed by a small convoy of state compliance vehicles. The neighborhood that once feared clipboard patrols now watched real authority arrive. Curtains shifted, doors cracked open. It was the first time in years the board's presence didn't command fear, but relief. I stood by the clubhouse entrance with Detective Lena as the state compliance officer. A sharp-faced woman named Carruthers briefed her team. "We'll be cataloging financial records, conducting resident interviews, and securing digital property," she said briskly. "Per statute, this community falls under immediate administrative receivership pending reauthorization." Her words carried the weight of finality. Brenda's era was officially dead. Residents began gathering in clusters near the courtyard, their voices low but hopeful. Marla approached, her dog tugging on the leash, and whispered, "It feels strange seeing real law here, not the kind that fines you for a mailbox color." I smiled faintly. "You earned this, Marla. You all did." Eddie arrived next, hat in hand, eyes scanning every car. "She's not coming back, right?" he asked. "Not for questioning, not for bail, nothing?" Lena shook her head. "She's under supervised release, barred from contacting any resident or accessing HOA systems." Eddie let out a breath that sounded like months of fear leaving his chest. Inside the clubhouse, the compliance team set up laptops, printers, and scanners. I watched as one officer pulled open drawers full of violation forms, all hand-signed by Brenda, no counter-signatures. Another opened a filing cabinet labeled Community Integrity, revealing rows of memory cards, each tagged with addresses. Lena photographed everything, her face unreadable. Carruthers turned to me. "Chief Reeves, you're our resident liaison today. We'll need your statement and verification of incident reports." I nodded and handed her a binder, the compiled evidence Eddie and I had assembled. "Everything's logged, cross-verified, and time-stamped," I said. "It shows a clear pattern of misconduct and unauthorized surveillance." As she reviewed the binder, her brows lifted slightly. "You built a better case file than half my investigators." "I've had practice," I said. This time, the target just happened to be my neighbor. Outside, the residents were forming a semicircle around the courtyard. The buzz of conversation grew. Someone must have spread the word that the state wanted to address everyone directly. Carruthers motioned to me. "You should speak first. They'll listen to you." I hesitated. I wasn't there as a cop. Not really. Not anymore. I was there as a father who'd seen what unchecked authority could do. But when I stepped up to the low stone ledge and saw all those faces, the quiet families, the older couples, even the teenagers who'd been afraid to hang out at the pool, I knew it was time. "Most of you already know why we're here," I began. "For years, this HOA ran on fear, fines, threats, humiliation. People stopped speaking to each other because they thought it was safer to stay silent. But silence isn't safety, it's surrender. And that ends today." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Marla nodded, eyes bright. Eddie stood off to the side, watching like a man who couldn't quite believe any of this was real. "The state's taken over administrative control," I continued. "They'll audit every record, void every illegal fine, and restore what should have been yours all along, your right to live without intimidation. This isn't about revenge. It's about rebuilding trust." Carruthers stepped beside me and addressed the crowd with the firm clarity of someone who'd done this before. "Copper Sands will remain under state receivership until we complete compliance restructuring. Residents will elect a new board afterward. Until then, all prior HOA directives are suspended." A collective gasp moved through the group, then applause, hesitant at first, then stronger. Relief turned to energy. Conversations broke out, laughter even. For the first time, people were talking to one another, not about each other. I caught Eddie's eye. He smiled, a real one this time. "Guess you were right," he said. "Sometimes the law just needs the right reason to show up." "Sometimes," I replied. "Sometimes it just needs the right push." As the sun climbed higher, Carruthers' team began their work, scanning records, collecting statements, sealing files. The courtyard that once hosted HOA meetings filled with the sound of printers and official voices instead of Brenda's threats. From the clubhouse balcony, I watched the crowd begin to disperse, residents returning to their homes with something new in their steps. Ownership, not fear. The outside authority had done its part, but the community was finally starting to reclaim its own. When I turned back toward the clubhouse, the reflection of the sun caught on one of the confiscated cameras sitting on a table. I picked it up, held it to the light, and saw my own face in the lens, a reminder of how easily power distorts its reflection. Then I set it down for evidence, where it belonged. Tomorrow would bring paperwork, hearings, follow-ups. But tonight, Copper Sands would finally sleep without someone watching. By sunset, every driveway in Copper Sands was full. Cars lined the curbs, neighbors stood in clusters with folded arms. And for once, the crowd outside the clubhouse wasn't there for one of Brenda's mandatory meetings. It was there for justice. The state compliance team had called for a public review, a community forum to explain what came next. The courtyard lights flicked on as the desert sky turned orange, and for the first time in this neighborhood's history, people showed up without fear of being fined for it. Detective Lena stood near the podium, clipboard in hand, her badge glinting beneath the lamplight. Beside her was Officer Carruthers, the compliance officer who'd led the audit. I stood just behind them, not in uniform tonight, just another resident in a plain shirt, hands clasped, waiting for the next chapter to unfold. When Carruthers tapped the microphone, the murmurs faded into stillness. "Residents of Copper Sands Estates," she began, voice calm and firm. "As of today, the State Compliance Division has completed its preliminary audit. What we found confirms severe misconduct under the leadership of Brenda Mallory." Gasps rippled through the crowd, though no one seemed surprised, only vindicated. She operated without legal standing, conducted unauthorized surveillance, and issued falsified violations against multiple residents, Carruthers continued. "Effective immediately, all fines and liens filed in the past 12 months are void. The HOA's charter is suspended until a re-election under state supervision." Someone clapped, then another. The sound spread, hesitant but rising. A man near the front shouted, "About time!" Laughter broke through the tension. The same people who once whispered in fear now raised their voices freely. Carruthers raised a hand for quiet. "We will now hear testimony from residents regarding their experiences under the prior administration. This is part of our official record." Marla stepped forward first, voice shaking but loud enough for everyone to hear. "I was fined $400 because my kid left a bicycle on the walkway for 5 minutes, she said. "When I tried to appeal, Brenda told me I was lucky. It wasn't worse. I paid just to keep her away from my family." Her voice cracked, and she stepped back to a wave of supportive murmurs. Next came an elderly man, his hand gripping the microphone like a lifeline. "She cut down my mesquite tree," he said. "Said it wasn't in the approved shade palette. That tree's been here since the house was built." The crowd booed softly. Every story echoed the same pattern: fear, fines, humiliation. Each one was a brick in the wall Brenda had built, and now those same voices were tearing it down piece by piece. Finally, Carruthers nodded to me. "Chief Reeves," she said, "you may address the residents." I stepped forward, scanning the faces. People who had lived across from me, waved politely, and looked away when trouble came. "You all know what she did to my family," I began. The words were heavy but steady. "You saw the ambulance, heard the sirens. But this isn't about me anymore. It's about all of us letting someone like that convince us we were powerless." The crowd listened in absolute silence. I gestured toward the clubhouse behind me. She used that office like a throne. She thought no one would ever question her authority, because she wrapped it in the language of order and compliance. But order without accountability is just tyranny dressed in paperwork. A few heads nodded, others looked down, guilt flickering in their eyes. I softened my voice. "The reason this investigation worked wasn't because I wear a badge. It's because people like Eddie Torres decided to stop being silent. He risked his job and his safety to tell the truth." Eddie, standing near the back, froze as dozens of faces turned toward him. His hands fumbled for his cap, but when the crowd began to clap, he lowered it instead. For the first time, he smiled. Not out of pride, but relief. I looked back to the crowd. If this neighborhood's going to heal, it starts with you. Talk to each other again. Protect one another. Don't wait for someone with a title to tell you what's right. Carruthers stepped forward, nodding. "You'll each receive information on how to participate in the new board elections. Until then, the Compliance Division will oversee maintenance, budgeting, and record management." She paused, then added, "And to those who were silenced, your voices are the reason we're here tonight." Applause erupted again, louder this time, echoing across the courtyard and into the desert night. The sound carried through the streets that had once been ruled by whispers. Children ran between their parents' legs, chasing shadows where once they had hidden from patrols. I stood there for a long moment, watching them reclaim their space, their laughter, their freedom. For the first time, Copper Sands felt alive. And somewhere deep inside, I realized justice wasn't a headline or a court date. It was this: a community no longer afraid to stand in the light. The courtyard emptied slowly, laughter and conversation fading into the hum of the desert night. I stayed behind, helping Carruthers' team pack up their equipment. The glow from the clubhouse spilled across the pavement, turning the scene golden. For the first time in months, this place didn't look like a battleground. It looked like a neighborhood again. Lena approached, holding a folder thick with paperwork. "State oversight wraps next week," she said. Once the re-election's complete, we'll hand it back to the residents. Brenda's hearing is set for the following month." She hesitated before adding, "You did the right thing, Daniel. The quiet kind, the kind that doesn't make headlines but changes everything." I nodded, watching as the last of the compliance vehicles pulled away. "I didn't do it alone," I said. "They just needed someone to remind them fear isn't law." Eddie walked over, still in his maintenance uniform, holding a folded notice. "They asked me to stay on as interim operations manager," he said, disbelief in his voice. "Said the residents voted for it." "You earned it," I told him. He rubbed the back of his neck, grinning sheepishly. "Feels weird being trusted again. Brenda used to say I wasn't smart enough to handle paperwork. Guess she'll have to watch me do it from a courtroom now." Lena smiled faintly. "We'll make sure she does." The air had cooled, carrying that dry scent of dust and relief. I stepped out toward the gate, past the rows of identical mailboxes Brenda once used to deliver her threats. Someone had taped a handwritten note to one of them. "Thank you for fighting back." The edges flapped softly in the breeze. As I reached the sidewalk, I looked up at the new sign Carruthers' team had installed earlier that afternoon. The old HOA emblem was gone, replaced by a simple plaque that read, "Copper Sands Community, Resident Governed." Beneath it was a small line, "In service, not control." Lena arrived with the baby, now sleeping against her shoulder. She stood beside me, tracing the letters on the plaque with her fingers. "It's over," she said quietly. "Almost," I replied. "There's one more thing." We walked together down the path to our porch. The melted canopy still hung where I'd left it. Its warped plastic now bleached pale by the sun. It looked smaller somehow, like it had lost its power. I picked it up and set it on the table, the heat-warped frame creaking under my fingers. "This stays," I said, "not as evidence anymore, as memory." Lena nodded. "A reminder of what happens when rules matter more than people." I smiled. "Exactly." She shifted the baby, who stirred but didn't wake. The neighborhood around us was alive. Screen doors opening, sprinklers ticking, neighbors calling goodnight. For months, everyone had moved in silence, afraid of fines or retaliation. Now their voices filled the air, the sound of normal life returning. The following morning, I stood by the community lake again, the one that had mirrored every phase of this fight, from fear to reckoning. The surface was still, but beneath it, fish darted in flashes of silver. Balance had returned, even if the scars remained. Carruthers met me there, clipboard in hand. "The report's finalized," she said. "You'll receive a public copy once the case closes. The board election will take place next month. You're invited to attend, though you're welcome to decline if you prefer privacy." I looked back at the rows of homes, sunlight reflecting off every window. "They don't need me anymore," I said. "That's the point." She smiled, offering a handshake. "Then I'd say mission accomplished, Chief." When she left, I lingered by the water, letting the stillness sink in. The victory wasn't loud, but it was complete. No revenge, no spectacle, just accountability. Brenda's reign of intimidation had ended not with a confrontation, but with structure, evidence, and the law doing exactly what it was built to do. I walked home through the front gate, where Eddie and Marla were repainting the entry arch. They'd chosen deep blue instead of Brenda's sterile beige. It looked bold, alive. Eddie waved his brush like a flag. "We're making it ours again," he said. "Keep it that way," I replied. When I stepped inside, Lena was on the couch, rocking the baby gently. He reached out toward me, tiny fingers curling around mine. The house was quiet, peaceful, and for the first time, I believed it would stay that way. I looked out the window toward the street, where the melted canopy caught the evening light, no longer a symbol of damage, but of endurance. Justice hadn't just fixed what was broken, it had rebuilt what mattered. If you want more stories of homeowners standing up to HOA tyranny, hit subscribe right now. Share your story in the comments, and let me know where you're watching from.